You got told it like
8 o'clock this morning when I got to the office today.
Oh, okay.
So, but I am given this, so that's why we're getting on a different subject, because I wasn't prepared to speak on the subject that Brandy was going to speak on. She's ill today. But this is I kind of call this the only subject really that's kind of a crowd pleaser in DPR. It's about food safety, about pesticide residues on food. I've spoken on this subject to many wide variety of audiences, so everybody's a little different to the food usually. So today we're talking about what the Department of Pesticide Regulation Authority is to monitor and enforce pesticide residues on produce. Our program that we've had it for I've worked with the department for 32 years, and this program was already in place when I first started. Some of the results of the program, how much illegal residues we see out there, type of enforcement actions we take, and then the season. So basically, the state gets mandated to do different things because the law is passed. So we're required to monitor pesticide residues on produce. It's a requirement. We have the authority to take samples of produce that is packed, stored, transported, or sold within California. So it's not just California grown, it's any kind of produce in the state. And that it's unlawful to pack, ship, or sell produce with illegal residues. And then we also incorporate the federal tolerances. We don't, a lot of the California laws, obviously are more strict than other states, but as far as the tolerances on produce, we use the US EPA tolerances that are used in every other state. And some of the reasons, the purpose of it is to monitor the food supply, make sure it's safe. And then for California grown produce, it's kind of a test of our program. When you see the results, you'll see that California grown produce is, usually, as far as our problems with the illegal residues is the least one. So it kind of is a test of the whole program, of all the registration process of the chemicals, the training and certification of applicators, and all these different things come together, restricted materials permit system, everything like that. And that's kind of the test of our overall program. And then also, it makes it a fair playing field here in the United States, because foreign-grown produce has to have, to abide by our tolerances. So those are a few things that have come out of this program. Okay, also, like I said, also, protecting the public. We do focus on pesticide residues on certain commodities that, that are in children's diets, ones that we know, if we have historical problems with certain kinds of produce from certain kinds of places. And we do initiate enforcement action on people that violate. Okay, I think most of you probably know this, but residue is the amount of the pesticide that is detected. So when we find, it has 0.1 parts per million of this pesticide on there. That's the amount. And then the tolerance is the maximum amount allowed. So acetate on Brussels sprouts is 3 parts per million. We find the tolerances are in the Federal Code of Regulations, Title 40, Part 180. I always just look, whenever I look at the tolerances, I do it online because they're the most up to date. And then there's acetate. And we look it up, and Brussels sprouts, that's the tolerance, 3 point, you see the third one down. Tells you how much you can have of acetate. So if it's if we analyze and find 3 parts per million or less, it's okay. Okay, so just our monitoring program. These are our program goals. Fruits and vegetables consumed by infants and children. Commodities treated with pesticides, listed as carcinogens or reproductive toxicants. And certain commodities and things in order to reflect differences in consumption. Like in California, we have so many different ethnic and socioeconomic groups that eat lots of different things. Half the time I'm like, what is that? I see somebody samples them, I don't even know what it is. So we do try to look at things like that are like more familiar to different groups. And then, like for instance, certain commodities we just see a lot more illegal residues on, so we'll put that as one of our goals. And we work with our MedTalks branch because to help generate data for dietary risk of certain pesticides. And just basically to try to keep produce with illegal residues out of the channels of trade. So we go, where do we sample? Like any place where the commodity is going to be offered for sale. So we'll go to big huge distribution centers. We'll go to farmers markets. We'll go to sometimes packing houses, retail, things like that. Okay. So I think this is the last data that we have compiled for the year. It'll be 2013, and this is how many samples we took statewide. 3,483 samples. We have 3 offices. We have 2 labs. So like in our office, we typically go out and collect samples twice a week. And so then you figure that's 3 offices doing that. And 155 different kinds, over 155 kinds of commodities. It has to be derived from plants. It has to be raw, not processed. Like I said, one thing that I found really interesting this last year, because like I said, we only sample what we consider raw, unprocessed commodities. So things like nuts that are, the husk is removed, the shells are removed. That would be considered processed because it's physically changed. Well, I saw somebody in one of our offices took green almonds as a sample. I'm like, that's a processed commodity, but apparently, I don't know if it's Mediterranean people or somebody, they do eat the raw almonds with the husk and everything. So that fell underneath our area of sampling, because normally for processed, Department of Health Services is one that does that. Okay, so our targets are most 70% U.S. produce and 30% imported, and that's kind of based on what's actually out there. Because usually about 70% is when we will go into a store or a distribution center. It's going to be, depending on the time of year, it's going to be U.S. grown, and then 30% probably imported. So 15% of what we want to sample is from Mexico. And then China's 5%, and other countries 10%. Lately I've seen things out there in the channels of trade from countries I've never seen before, like Spain, Italy. Usually we get from Central American countries and Mexico, places like that. China because of certain types of commodities, but we've had some persimmons that came in from Spain that we analyzed, and I forgot what they told me they sampled that was from Italy, but kind of different. Okay, this is our Sacramento lab. We had to ship ours in the mail, but we ship them overnight. Our Sacramento lab, they get them and they analyze them. And what we have, this is some of the machinery. What's been going on too recently is that we were able to get some money, the labs were able to get enough money to change over to different types of analytical equipment that can analyze a lot of the chemicals we never could analyze for in the past on our screen. We could always analyze for anything that's registered for use on the commodities, but as far as running a screen, we used to just run organophosphate, carbamate, chlorinated hydrocarbon screens, and a lot of those chemicals, there's some that are still around, but there's a whole lot of new kinds of chemicals that are out there. So now with our new screens, we're able to find tons of things we never found before. So the old and then the new, so we can get over 300 pesticides on the screen. Okay, and most of our minimum detection limits will be 0.01 parts per million. Sometimes they can analyze down further if they happen to be able to confirm it at a lower amount, they'll confirm it at a lower amount. But that's just like a general rule. Okay, and this is going to show you the kind of difference between the amount we used to find with the old types of analytical methods and then what we can find now. Back in 2011, 60.8% of things that were analyzed had no pesticide residues that we could detect at all. And then 35.8% did have pesticides on there, but they were okay, they were legal. And only 3.4% had illegal residues. But then we move forward to 2013, the white part has been reduced quite a bit. So we went from 60% with nothing detected to now only 43% with nothing detected on it. And our illegal residues did go up a little bit to 4.97%. Okay, 173 illegal samples that had illegal residues, 75% were from imported produce, and like 25% were U.S. produce.
What kind of produce comes from China?
The one that we always have a lot of problem with is fresh ginger. It has aldicarb on it a lot of times. And there have been, I don't know if it's in this presentation or not, but there have been health alerts from the Department of Public Health. And then, yeah, that's the main one that we have problems with from China. Okay, so 80% of them are no tolerance established. And the problem with no tolerance established is if we detect even like a part per trillion, basically, there's no tolerance established, it still can be considered an illegal residue. And so, like you can imagine, other countries, most of our illegal residues are from other countries. They're allowed to use things that we don't use here in the United States. So you are going to find more no tolerance established illegal residues.
When you start talking about parts per trillion, I mean, that could be almost coming from the atmosphere too.
Practically, I know what you're saying, but it's, it's new technology. You're having to try to look at it different ways because, now the lab can analyze down to very, very small amounts. And what is it? There's really nothing such thing practically as zero. So, but like I said, if there's no tolerance established, they also have, like we'll get into a little bit more, is that the produce people do have, opportunities to try to recondition or things like that. We do find in small amounts. And then 19.7% are just over tolerance, like, a little bit over what the tolerance is. Okay, so samples of California grown produce, we took, I guess, of that amount of, I guess it looks like about a third of our samples were California grown produce. And we only had 26 illegal residues, and so that would only accounts for 2.2%. So basically, 97.8% of California grown produce is in compliance with the U.S. tolerances. U.S. grown samples, we had 43 illegal residues of those, and that was about 2%. So again, 98% of U.S. grown samples complied with tolerances. Organic produce, yeah, we take samples of organic produce. Because organic produce, first of all, they do apply pesticides, but most of the pesticides they apply are exempt from tolerance, and we probably wouldn't even analyze one like sulfur and things like that, BT. But some organic produce isn't really as organic as even meat. They only had 2 that year, but we've had ones where, and whenever we find an illegal residue or any, I think any residues on organic produce, then we do refer it to CDFA to look into it some more. But we had one that was, not only was it, it shouldn't be on organic, it was like a totally illegal residue. The guy, it was a farmer's market, and I guess he runs short of his artichokes, so he just went to the store and bought some and sold them. So, yeah, that was, because we're like, how'd you get, on artichokes? So I think he bought some from another country or something, I don't know. So, at that year, 99% comply, but like I said, we do, it's just because it says it's organic doesn't mean that it is. Okay, yeah.
What about other countries?
Organic. Well, that's a good question because
I know China is definitely following all the rules.
China is? Well, I don't think that, I really honestly haven't really seen any organic produce from China. The only one, like companies in the United States that have growers in other countries, like a big one is like Driscoll. They have people in like Mexico that grow organically for them, and they're very, 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 we did have an illegal residue organic from Driscoll, and like that grower just totally blew it because Driscoll, not in their contract, they not only, you know, the guy, they make you pull up the whole field. So if it's to me, if it's an American company, I would feel more comfortable with it than somebody that's just trying to buy quote organic and they really don't know about that grower, that history of that person. They're not working with them like an American company would be working with them. So, but anyway, we had a lot of problems, cactus pads and cactus fruit. We ended up having a lot of kind of serious illegal residues on cactus pads that 1 year. A chemical monocrotophos, which I think it used to be dibrome. I'm not sure, but it's an organophosphate. And so that, we're having problems with that because it was like even like a hazard, possible health concern. So that's why we ended up having so many samples and things like that 1 year. Gals from Mexico, cilantro from the United States. Part of our problem is that the breakdown product from DDT is in the soil, and then that breakdown product will get on the cilantro from the dirt, and there's actually, they find that for like 30 years they finally abolished the tolerance, but they do actually have some action levels that we can kind of follow because it's just, I forgot what they call it, legacy pesticides, I guess, ones that like chlorinated hydrocarbons that take forever to break down in the environment. Snow peas from Guatemala, squash from Mexico, we're focusing on that this year too, and we're still finding problems on that. Limes from Mexico, papaya, tomatillo, chili peppers, ginger from China, and spinach from the United States. And that one's mainly, there's a pesticide, I can't think of the name of, I don't know what the trade names are, probamylcarb or something like that. And it's registered on lettuce. And so a lot of our, you know, how in the coastal areas, the way that they farm is very, very, you know, like, well, first of all, you know, things only grow for like 2 weeks before they harvest them. You have baby spinach, baby lettuce, baby this, baby that. And so they're constantly growing things. There's lettuce over here. And so most of the time when we find these illegal residues on spinach, it's a low amount. And there's been so many applications in the area, we don't even know how it got there. We can't really take any investigative samples because they've already harvested the field. So that's what a lot of the spinach issues are. So it's like, I don't think just the best thing to do is get it registered on spinach, but I don't know if they can.
Do you still find any timic?
No, thank God. We have, well, like I said, all the carb is that's, we find it in ginger every once in a while from China. Because, well, it kind of makes sense because ginger is a root crop and aldocarb is very water soluble, goes in. So, but as far as American grown, we haven't found any aldocarb or its breakdown fungus. Okay, so like I said, we continue to improve. As of August 2014, both of our labs are totally up in line with their new, you know, GCMS and LCMS equipment. So you see all these chemicals that were not previously detected. I don't think you can read it very well from back there, but basically a lot of the stuff like that, you know, is not an organophosphate, it's carbamazine. We're being able to find it. Okay. This just talks about comparisons between how much of everything we found. Okay, so when we get an illegal residue, in fact, this morning, that's what I was going to be working on. We had 3 detections of illegal residues that we're going to follow up on today, but other people in the office were doing it. One was spinach, one was squash from Mexico with methylmidifos, peppers with methylmidifos, and I forget what it was now. But so when we get these illegal residues, and a couple of them were very, very low in their low amounts, there's no tolerance established. All of them were, I think. We notify all of our other regional offices about the detection so that they can look for that when they're out doing their sampling. We notify FDA. If it was grown in California, we notify that county. We try to find the grower because the county will have to do follow-up with them. And like I said, we look for the channels of trade. So we kind of have a twofold thing going on. One is quote the public protection part of it to ensure that that commodity with the illegal residue isn't being sold. And the other part is the enforcement part of it. So like today they'll be calling the place where we took the sample. Do you still have any more of it? If they do, we'll quarantine it. And then we'll go into that a little later. And then depending on what we find in the investigation, like if it was, all these were imported, so we try to find out who was the first person to import it into the country, because we're starting to try to, with illegal residues from growers in Mexico or some other country, there's nothing we can really do to the grower, to that field, to anything like that. So we're kind of going after the importers now, trying to get them to be more responsible and be more aware of what's going on. Like I said, if a lot of these importers, they just get an order and they just scramble to try to find somebody they can purchase it from in that country, and they don't really know that grower very well. So we're trying to get them to be more responsible. So we are tracking their history and taking, we're going to start taking some fine actions against some of the importers. And like I said, growers, okay, if it's a grower, I think I go into a little bit more, pest control businesses, advisors, dealers, we've taken action against all of those different kinds of entities in relation to illegal residues we found. Okay, so if they still have it, then we're going to quarantine it. This is our authority that we can seize and hold any lot of produce that's suspected of carrying an illegal residue or has an illegal residue. And so then we trace back, like I said, import records, either the importer or the grower in the field. But we also have our health assessment group look to see even, is this a possible health concern? We can't do a recall. Department of Public Health can do recalls. So, but we can, ask for information from companies and let them know that we feel that it might be a health concern. Department of Health Services, they don't do recalls unless it's very, very, very serious. Like I said, the Aldo Farm on the ginger was one that they had done recently, had to do with pesticides. And this is it right here. That's back in 2007, I guess. And so if they pack shipping and selling, we really don't use this fine action on California growers because there's different things we can do, because usually it's something they did, like use the wrong product or broke some kind of other law. But for pack shipping and selling, we can prosecute up to $25,000 for each violation. And so those are the ones that we can take against importers, and we could take it against packers and shippers in California, but we usually don't. So once the produce is quarantined, they can either, submit another sample to a private lab, and if it comes back, within tolerance, then we will probably allow it to be released with a warning, that just because this lab says that doesn't mean that, another analysis somewhere else down the channels of trade would show an illegal residue. And the one thing that we always have to remind people when they do go to a private lab is they have to be able to detect down to our limit, because sometimes we took the sample to a private lab, or maybe they had even done it before. We've had those where samples have been taken before. Yeah, but they only detected down to 0.1 parts per million. We go to 0.01 or even less. So they kind of wasted their money on that situation. They can try to recondition this. This really doesn't happen very often, but let's just say illegal residues on apples, picture shows, and they determine that, by peeling it, cooking it, it gets rid of the illegal residue, and then Department of Health Services that oversees the processed commodities allows it to go do that. There's a company that actually accepts this stuff that's being reconditioned, then they can do that. But people are nowadays just don't want to bother with something like that. And then whatever's quarantined, if they decide that they can't recondition it, they're not going to ship it back to the grower or whatever, they just destroy it on site. So like I said, if it's grown in California, we contact the grower, find the field. Then the county, if they're still harvesting, the county can prohibit the harvest of that commodity in the field until we can make sure that there's no illegal residues. Then they usually take investigative samples to try to determine, if it was a drift, did the grower actually use it himself? Did it look like that? Did he break a pre-harvest interval? Did he use too much of it? Contaminate tank, whatever. Now, so the county, for any of those violations I just talked about, like label violations, pre-harvest violations, things like that, the county has the authority and they would probably take a fine action against the grower for those violations. But the state, if it involves a person that's licensed by DPR, like a pest control advisor, a pesticide dealer, a pest control business that did something, we can take an action against them. And if we determine that the grower used it intentionally, he knew he shouldn't use it, he knew it wasn't legal, but that he could get away with it, the state has the authority to make them destroy their crop. Even if the residue goes to undetected limits, or they pull all the existing fruit or whatever off of the plant, and we can still make them destroy their crop because it's considered an unfair business advantage. And then once again, the pack, ship, and sell penalty violations, the state can do that. So, in summary, only a small percentage of samples have illegal residues. Most of them aren't grown in California. Very few are considered health risks, and when illegal residues are found, we do take them out of channels of trade. We do protect the public. So, any questions? Yes.
Farmers markets, swap meets, places like that, do you sample?
We do some, probably not as much as we should, because it just depends on, it coincides with the time and a place that we can go to take a sample. But yes, we do. Okay.
Gosh, Megan, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.